Welcome back to the deep dive. I
Yep.
want to start today by asking you to do something a little bit old school. I want you to picture a map of the world.
Okay.
You know the standard projection you probably had on the wall of your classroom growing up?
The Mercator projection, all stretched out at the poles.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Now you scan the Pacific Ocean, that massive, overwhelming blue void between the Americas and Australia. If you look really, really closely, you might see a few specks. Maybe you see Hawaii because it's bolded, maybe Fiji. But if you look for the subject of today's deep dive, you might just miss it entirely.
Which is ironic, considering just how much space they actually take up.
Exactly. We're looking at the Cook Islands.
Yeah.
And on paper, this place is a paradox.
Yeah.
I was looking at the data you pulled, and the math, it barely makes sense. We're talking about a country with a landmass of roughly 236 square kilometers.
Right.
To put that in perspective for you, that's smaller than the city of Milwaukee. It's smaller than the Cayman Islands. It's tiny.
It is. It's essentially 15 small islands scattered across the water. If you stood on the highest point on the main island and looked out, you'd see a lot of ocean and very, very little else.
But, and this is the hook that got me, if you draw a line around their territorial waters, their exclusive economic zone, or EEZ,
Mm-hmm.
it is nearly 2 million square kilometers.
That's the paradox of scale right there. You have a landmass the size of a mid-sized city, but an ocean footprint roughly the size of Western Europe.
Western Europe, that's staggering.
It is. Or, to use a different comparison that might be easier to visualize, it's an area of ocean comparable to the entire landmass of Mexico.
So practically speaking, this is a country that is 99.9% water.
And 0.1% land. That's the reality of the Cook Islands. You're not governing land with a bit of coast. You're governing an ocean that happens to have a few islands in it.
That ratio defines everything we're going to talk about today, doesn't it?
Completely.
It's not just a geography factoid. It shapes their politics, their economy, their entire identity. It's the canvas upon which their national story is painted.
Absolutely. The mission for this deep dive is to unpack how a micronation, because that's what it is, geographically manages to punch so far above its weight class.
It really does.
We're looking at a place that has to maintain a distinct cultural identity while navigating a very complex, almost confusing political marriage with New Zealand.
And it's not just about politics. The surprising facts list in these articles was wild. I mean, we're going to talk about a fish that costs as much as a new car.
A very nice new car at that.
We're going to talk about a legal framework that was explicitly designed to effectively tell the U.S. Department of Justice to take a hike.
And we're going to get into the really thorny issue of seabed mining, which pits their identity as these pristine ocean guardians against the potential for massive, massive wealth.
It's a lot to cover. But let's start where we always should. The physical reality. Because the Cook Islands implies a single group. But looking at the breakdown, it feels like we're dealing with two completely different worlds.
We really are. Geographically and geologically, the country is split into two distinct chains, the northern group and the southern group.
And they couldn't be more different.
Not at all. It's almost like two different countries that just happen to share a flag and a government.
Okay, so let's start with the north. When I read the descriptions of the northern group islands like Penrhyn and Manihiki, it felt like reading about a different planet, or at least the classic desert island cartoon. You know, the one with the single palm tree.
That's a fair comparison. The northern group consists of these incredibly old coral atolls. And to understand them, you have to understand the geology of the Pacific. These used to be high volcanic islands millions and millions of years ago.
Like Hawaii.
Exactly like Hawaii is now. But over eons, the heavy volcanic rocks sank back into the Earth's crust, a process called subsidence. As the land sank, the coral reefs that were growing around the edges of the island just kept growing upwards to stay near the sunlight.
So the volcano disappears underwater, and you're left with just the ring of coral that was growing around it.
Precisely. You're left with a ring of coral reef and sand, usually enclosing a lagoon where the mountain used to be. We are talking about land that is mere meters above sea level.
Wow.
If a big wave from a cyclone comes, it washes right over. There's no high ground to run to.
And because they are these sunken volcanoes, there's not much soil, right? You can't exactly run a farm there. It's just sand and coral rubble.
No, not at all. It's a subsistence lifestyle. You have coconut palms, you have breadfruit, you have taro that you grow in excavated pits, you have pigs, and you have fish from the lagoon and the ocean. That's about it.
So it's rugged.
It is a rugged frontier existence. Freshwater is a constant struggle. You rely heavily on rainwater catchment systems. If there's a drought, you are in serious trouble.
And they are isolated. I mean, truly isolated.
Incredibly so. These islands are hundreds and hundreds of kilometers apart from each other, let alone from the capital in the south. We aren't talking about a quick ferry ride. It can take days, sometimes a week, to get there by boat.
A week on the open ocean just to get to another part of your own country.
And flights are infrequent and very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
It's a level of isolation that is hard for most of us living in interconnected cities to really grasp.
Okay, so contrast that with the southern group. This is where Rarotonga is, the main island, the capital.
Right. And the southern group is a whole different ballgame. Geologically, it's much younger. These are high islands. They are volcanic, mountainous, jagged.
They look more like what you'd see in a movie.
Exactly. If you look at Rarotonga, it looks like a mini Tahiti or a mini Kauai. You have these sharp, dramatic peaks covered in dense green jungle.
Because they haven't sunk yet. They're still in their volcanic prime, so to speak.
Exactly. And because volcanic soil is incredibly fertile, they are lush, they are green, they can support commercial agriculture, citrus, bananas, all sorts of things. They can support a much higher population density.
Which explains the population split you mentioned.
It does. It's the fundamental reason. About 90% of the entire population of the Cook Islands lives in the southern group, and the vast majority of those are on Rarotonga alone. So you have this dynamic where the capital, the international airport, the hospitals, the government, everything is concentrated in the south.
And the north is just out there.
It's the outer islands. And in the Cook Islands context, outer really means outer. It's not like taking a train to the suburbs.
Right.
It creates a fascinating internal dynamic where the lived experience of a Cook Islander in Manihiki who might be a pro farmer is vastly different from one in Rarotonga who works in the tourism industry.
But that isolation, that deep, relatively untouched water, it has an upside, doesn't it? The source material mentions that these waters are hiding some biological treasures.
Yeah.
And I have to talk about this fish, the peppermint angelfish.
Centropigeon boile. Yes. A legend in the marine biology and aquarium world.
The notes say it cost $30,000. 30,000 US dollars for a single fish. I mean, I've bought cars for less than a tenth of that.
In the high-end aquarium trade, yes, it is the holy grail. If you are a very wealthy collector in Tokyo or New York or Dubai, this is the centerpiece. This is the fish you show off.
Why? What makes it so special? Is it made of gold? Is it the last one on Earth?
No, and that's the fascinating part. It's not endangered in the sense that there are only 3 left. In its specific deep water habitat around the Cook Islands, it's actually reasonably common. The problem isn't finding it. The problem is getting it.
It lives in the twilight zone, right? That's what they call it.
Exactly. We're talking about the mesophotic zone, deep coral reefs, usually between 50 to 120 meters deep.
Okay, so for non-divers, 120 meters that's not just deep. That's extremely deep.
It is crushing depth. To put it in perspective, a standard recreational scuba diving certification usually limits you to 30 or 40 meters. To go to 100 meters requires highly specialized equipment called rebreathers, which recycle your air. You're breathing mixed gases, usually trimix, which adds helium to the breathing gas to counteract the narcotic effects of nitrogen at that pressure.
So it's a technical, dangerous dive.
It's closer to being an astronaut than a swimmer. The planning, the risk, the training, it's immense.
But here's the kicker. Even if you can get down there and you manage to catch one in a little net, you can't just bring it up.
No. That's the biology constraint. And it's the same for any deep water fish. They have swim bladders. These are gas-filled organs that help them maintain buoyancy. If you bring a fish up from 100 meters to the surface quickly, the surrounding water pressure drops dramatically and the gas in that swim bladder expands.
Like opening a shaken soda can.
Perfect analogy. It's fatal. It ruptures their internal organs. It's the same principle as the bends, or decompression sickness, in human divers.
You have to decompress the fish.
You do. It is an incredibly slow, painstaking process. You have to bring them up in stages, holding them at certain depths for hours, sometimes over days, to let the gas in their system slowly off-gas and equalize. Or you use special hyperbaric chambers designed for fish.
Wow.
That is what you are paying for. You aren't paying for the fish. You are paying for the technical mastery, the specialized equipment, and the immense risk required to retrieve it alive and healthy.
And it's visually striking, too, I take it. It's not just a brown fish.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's stunning. It's a bright, burning orange-red with these stark, clean, vertical white stripes. It looks almost painted, like a piece of pop art. In a tank, under the right lighting, it glows.
So we have this amazing biodiversity win with the angelfish. But the sources also point to a major biodiversity tragedy, and it involves a villain we see all over the Pacific history books, the rat.
The scourge of islands everywhere, a truly devastating invasive species.
Oh,
In the Cook Islands, you have two types of invaders. You have the Curatoka, the Polynesian rat, which arrived with the original Polynesian settlers over 1,000 years ago.
so that one's been there a while.
A long while. But then you have the real killer, the ship rat, the Norway rat, which arrived with the Europeans on their sailing vessels in the 18th and 19th centuries. They're bigger, more aggressive, and more rapacious.
And for birds that evolved on islands without any ground predators, this is the apocalypse.
It is. You have to understand, these birds evolved in a paradise. There were no snakes, no stoats, no cats, no mammals to eat them. Many of them nest on the ground or in low branches. They didn't evolve fear because they didn't need it. They wouldn't know to fly away.
And then suddenly there's a rat, a creature they have no instinct for.
Exactly. The rats swarm the nests, they eat the eggs, they eat the chicks. For many species, the breeding success rate dropped to 0. The impact was catastrophic. The forests went silent.
There was a specific story in the notes about lorikeet, the Cool's lorikeet.
The Rimatara lorikeet, or the cooer in the local language. It's a small, vibrant bird with a bright red breast and green wings. Just a beautiful little thing.
And it was native to the Cooks.
Historically, it was found on at least 5 of the southern islands. But it wasn't just the rats that got them.
Humans.
Humans played a role, too. They were prized for those red feathers. In Polynesian culture, red is a high-status color. It's the color of royalty, of chiefs. It represents mana spiritual power, authority, divinity.
So the feathers were a status symbol.
A huge one. The feathers were used in chiefly girdles, in ceremonial headdresses. To make one single chiefly girdle could require the feathers of hundreds of birds.
That's not sustainable.
Not at all. So between the human exploitation for fashion and status and the relentless rat predation, the Cool's lorikeet went extinct in the Cook Islands. Gone. Wiped out. Completely wiped out by the early 20th century.
But the story doesn't end there, which is the hopeful part. This is where we get a bit of a Jurassic Park moment without the dinosaurs eating people.
A much more successful reintroduction story, yes. A small remnant population had survived on the single rat-free island of Rimatara in French Polynesia. In 2007, conservationists from several organizations launched this desperate rescue mission.
An ark, basically.
A modern-day ark. They took 27 of these birds from Rimatara and flew them to the island of Attu in the Cooks.
27 birds to restart an entire species in a new country. That is a genetic bottleneck if I've ever heard one. The margin for error is 0.
It is incredibly risky. One bad storm, one disease outbreak, and it's over. But Attu was chosen very carefully. They had done extensive back-breaking work on rat control to create safe zones.
And crucially, the community on Attu was on board.
That was the key. They wanted the bird back. The local chiefs placed a rahui, a traditional ban on harming the birds. The community saw it as reclaiming a piece of their lost heritage, their taonga.
Did it work?
It was a resounding success. The population is now established, they are breeding, the birds are thriving. It's one of the great conservation comeback stories of the Pacific. It proves that even when we break an ecosystem, sometimes with enough effort, science, and community buy-in, we can fix it.
That mindset, fixing and protecting the ecosystem, seems to be formalized now on a much grander scale. We have to talk about Moro Moana.
The sacred ocean.
This was established in 2017. And the scale of this thing goes right back to our paradox of scale in the intro. It's mind-boggling.
It does. It's the ultimate expression of that paradox. The government passed legislation designating the entire exclusive economic zone, all 1.9 million square kilometers, as a marine park.
Wait, the whole thing, not just a designated sanctuary in one corner.
The whole thing. Now, that doesn't mean you can't fish anywhere. It's a mixed-use park. It has strictly zoned areas for different activities. There are exclusion zones around each island where commercial fishing and mining are banned, creating protective bubbles. But the entire zone operates under a single framework of conservation first. It is the largest single protected area on the planet designated by one country.
That is a massive statement for a country of 15,000 people to make. It's saying, we aren't just islands in the sea, we are a sea nation.
Exactly. It completely shifts the psychology. The ocean isn't just the empty space between the islands. The ocean is the country. It reinforces their role as custodians of what they call the Blue Pacific.
Which makes the mining debate we'll get to later all the more complicated and fraught with tension.
It really does.
But before we get to the modern economy, I want to step back. We've talked about the land and the water. Now I want to talk about the name, the Cook Islands.
A name that carries a lot of baggage and a lot of historical confusion.
I was surprised, I mean genuinely surprised, to learn that Captain Cook didn't name them that.
No, that is one of the most common misconceptions in Pacific history. Captain James Cook did visit. He stopped by in 1773 and again in 1777 during his voyages.
He was just passing through.
Essentially, he spent very little time there. He charted some of the islands for sure. He named one island, Manue, Hervey Island, after a Lord of the Admiralty back in England.
Okay, so a classic colonial naming convention.
Very typical. But he actually missed Rarotonga entirely, the main island. He sailed right past it without seeing it. So the idea that he discovered or named the whole group is just wrong.
So for a while, on the British maps, they were the Hervey Islands.
The southern group was, yes, for about 50 years.
So how on earth did we get Cook Islands? If not from Cook, then from who?
The name actually came from a Russian.
A Russian? In the South Pacific. How does that happen?
A Baltic German cartographer working for the Russian Navy, an admiral named Adam Johann von Krusenstern.
Okay, that is a name.
In the 1820s, decades after Cook had died, Krusenstern was compiling this grand, definitive atlas of the Pacific. He admired Cook immensely as a navigator and explorer. He saw him as the father of Pacific cartography. So as a tribute, he looked at the southern group of islands on his charts and decided to name them the Cook Islands in honor of the captain.
So a Russian cartographer working in St. Petersburg named a Polynesian nation after a British explorer who barely spent any time there.
It shows that globalization started earlier than we think. And that name, published in this very influential atlas, stuck. It became the international standard.
But before the Russians and the British showed up, the islands obviously had names. And looking at the Spanish records, some of the very first European names were arguably much, much better.
Much more poetic, certainly. The Spanish were actually the first Europeans to spot the northern islands, way back in 1595. The explorer Alvaro de Mendaña saw the atoll of Puka Puka and named it San Bernardo.
St. Bernard, okay. A bit generic.
It is. But then, in 1606, the Portuguese captain Pedro Fernandes de Queiroz, who was sailing for Spain, landed on the island of Rakahanga. And he was so struck by the inhabitants, he described them as healthy, strong, beautiful, that he named the island Gente Hermosa.
Which translates to
Beautiful people.
the island of beautiful people. I mean, come on, from a branding perspective, that is gold. Why would you trade the island of beautiful people for the Cook Islands?
Well, colonial powers rarely asked the locals for branding advice. The maps were drawn in London and St. Petersburg, not Rakahanga. But this brings us to a very modern, very heated debate. There is a strong movement to change the name.
To get rid of Cook.
Yes. The name is seen by many as a colonial relic. In 2019, a government committee was formed to look into this, and they actually recommended dropping the English name entirely to find a new title that reflects the Polynesian nature of the nation.
Something indigenous.
Exactly. Something that spoke to their own history, not a British captain's history, especially a captain who didn't even stop at the main island and had nothing to do with naming the country.
It makes sense. We've seen this happen elsewhere. Swaziland became Eswatini. Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. It's a post-colonial reclaiming of identity.
It is. But the backlash was fascinating. It didn't just come from conservative traditionalists on the islands or, people worried about the cost of rebranding the tourism board.
Where did it come from?
It came very loudly and very passionately from the diaspora.
The Cook Islanders living overseas.
Right. And we'll touch on the numbers later, but they are staggering. There are way more Cook Islanders in New Zealand and Australia than there are in the Cook Islands itself. And a huge number of them said, no, don't change it.
Why?
Yeah.
That seems counterintuitive. You'd think they would be the most supportive of a pro-indigenous move.
Identity is a tricky thing, isn't it? For those living away for generations in some cases, the label Cook Islander is how they define themselves in a foreign land. It's the box they check on the census. It's the name of their church group, their rugby club.
It's their brand.
It's their identity. They felt that changing the name was like erasing the label they had built their lives and communities around. They felt a sense of ownership over the name Cook Islands, maybe even more so than the people at home.
That is a fascinating psychological twist. The people who actually live there might want to change it to reflect their daily reality and heritage, but the people who left are holding on to the name as an anchor to that very heritage.
Exactly. It highlights this incredible tension between the homeland and the community abroad. So in the end, they reached a compromise.
The classic political solution.
Pretty much. They kept the English name Cook Islands. But they are working on adopting a new official Maori name to sit alongside it. Currently, the Maori name is Kuki-Irani.
Which is just...
It's just a transliteration. It's Cook Islands spoken with a Maori phonology. It has no deeper meaning. They want a proper name that has actual cultural resonance, perhaps referring to the ocean or the people or historical figure. But for now, Cook Islands remains the global brand.
This tension between the locals and the diaspora, and especially the influence of New Zealand, is the perfect segue to the politics. Because when I tried to figure out the political status of this country, I got a headache.
It is unique. It really is one of a kind.
Are they independent? Are they part of New Zealand? And it seems to be both and neither.
The answer is yes and no. Since 1965, they have been a self-governing state in free association with New Zealand.
Free association. Break that down for us. This isn't just a colony or a territory like, say, Guam is to the U.S.
No, it's not a colony. The Cook Islands has its own parliament. They have their own prime minister, currently Mark Brown. They write their own laws. They manage their own budget. If the New Zealand Parliament passes a law in Wellington, it does not apply in Rarotonga unless the Cook Islands Parliament explicitly chooses to adopt it.
Okay, so they are sovereign in terms of internal management. They run their own show at home.
Correct. But historically, under the 1965 agreement, New Zealand retained responsibility for defense and foreign affairs.
The way a parent might handle things for an adult child living at home.
That's a decent analogy, though over the decades that has changed significantly. The Cook Islands has taken over almost all of its own foreign affairs. They sign treaties, they establish embassies.
So where is the link? What is the core of this association?
The citizenship. This is the linchpin. This is the absolute core of the relationship.
Explain the one-way street. I found this fascinating.
Every person born in the Cook Islands or of Cook Islands descent is a New Zealand citizen. They hold a black New Zealand passport, period, full stop.
That is incredibly valuable.
It is one of the most powerful passports in the world. It means a kid born on a tiny atoll in the northern group can grow up, fly to Auckland, go to university, get access to the New Zealand healthcare system, get a job, and live there for the rest of their life without ever applying for a visa. It's an automatic right.
But it doesn't work the other way around.
No, and this is the genius of the arrangement for them. A New Zealander born in Christchurch is not a Cook Islands national.
I thought just move there.
No. They are treated as foreigners. They can't just move to Rarotonga and buy a house or a piece of land. They can't vote there. There are strict controls on land ownership to ensure the small local population isn't bought out by wealthy foreigners.
That is a sweet deal.
Yeah.
You get the protection and the immense economic and social opportunity of a developed nation, but you protect your own sovereignty and land from being overwhelmed by them.
It is the best of both worlds, which is why they guard it so jealously. And this explains the weird situation with the United Nations.
Right. The Cook Islands is not a member of the UN, not a full member anyway.
They are not. They are members of many UN agencies like the World Health Organization and UNESCO. They have what's called treaty-making capacity, which is a big deal in international law, but they don't have a seat and a vote in the General Assembly.
Why not? They're a country. They act like a country.
Because New Zealand has quietly warned, and the Cook Islands government understands, that full UN membership usually implies a full, distinct, and separate citizenship. The UN Charter is about member states.
And if they become a fully separate member state, the argument for them keeping New Zealand citizenship gets much, much weaker.
Exactly. New Zealand might say, okay, if you want to be totally independent on the world stage, that's great. We support you. But you need to have your own passport. You can't have it both ways. Hand back our passports.
And for the people, that is a non-starter.
A total non-starter. The ability to live and work in New Zealand is the economic and social safety valve for the entire country. So, the Prime Minister, Mark Brown, recently noted that joining the UN isn't a priority because it poses a direct risk to that citizenship status. It would require a referendum, and it likely wouldn't pass.
They are walking a geopolitical tightrope. They want to be independent enough to sign deals with the U.S. and China, but dependent enough to keep the passports.
And they are doing it successfully. In 2023, the United States formally recognized the Cook Islands as a sovereign state and established full diplomatic relations. That was a huge win for them.
A major validation.
It validated their sovereignty in the eyes of the world, the biggest superpower, without forcing them to break the New Zealand link. It was a masterful piece of diplomacy.
It's basically saying, we are small, but we are complicated, and you have to deal with us on our terms.
And being complicated and sovereign costs money. Running a country costs money. Which brings us to the economy.
Segment 4. Sun, Sea, and Secrecy.
Let's start with the sun. Tourism.
It's the obvious one. White sand beaches, blue water.
It is the engine. It accounts for about 67.5% of the GDP. Two-thirds of every dollar made in that country comes from visitors, mostly from New Zealand and Australia.
It feels incredibly risky. We saw what happened during the pandemic.
The tap turned off. Overnight, zero income. It revealed just how fragile that economic monoculture is. And it all relies on a single point of failure, Rarotonga International Airport. If a major cyclone takes out that runway, the economy stops. Period.
So they need to diversify. And this is where things get morally interesting. The outline mentions asset protection.
This is the part of the Cook Islands economy you don't see on the postcards with the sunsets.
We're talking about offshore trusts, a tax haven.
Not exactly a tax haven in the traditional sense, more of a legal fortress. Since 1989, the Cook Islands has passed a series of laws designed to make it the world's premier jurisdiction for asset protection trusts.
In plain English, what does that mean?
It means it is a place to put your money where lawyers, creditors, and angry ex-spouses cannot get it.
The New York Times had a pretty scathing quote about this. They said these laws were devised to thwart the reach of American justice.
That is not an exaggeration. That is literally what they are for. Here is how it works. Let's say you are a wealthy doctor in California. You are worried about getting sued for malpractice in the future. You move your life savings into a Cook Islands trust.
Okay. Then I get sued. A jury in California finds against me. The judge says, you owe the plaintiff $2 million. Hand it over.
You then say, I'd love to, Your Honor, but I can't. The money isn't mine anymore. It's owned by my trust in the Cook Islands. The judge then orders the Cook Islands trustee to hand over the money.
And the trustee says?
The Cook Islands trustee says, I'm sorry, I can't do that. That court order is from California. We don't recognize it here. They even have a specific clause in their law called the duress clause. If a foreign trustee is ordered by a foreign court to hand over money, they are legally required by Cook Islands law to ignore that order because they are deemed to be acting under duress.
They just ignore the U.S. court system.
Yes. Under Cook Islands law, foreign judgments are generally meaningless. If the person suing you wants that money, they have to start all over again. They have to fly to the Cook Islands, they have to hire a local lawyer, they have to file a brand new lawsuit in a Cook Islands court under Cook Islands law.
Which I assume is expensive and difficult.
Incredibly. And the standard of proof is much higher. In the U.S., for a civil case, you just need a preponderance of the evidence, 51% likely. In the Cook Islands, for a claim of fraudulent transfer to be successful, you need proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's the criminal standard.
That is the standard used for murder trials. It is nearly impossible to win.
So it's a fortress.
It is a financial fortress, and for the Cook Islands government, it's lucrative. The fees and taxes from this trust industry make up about 8% of the GDP.
8%. That's significant.
It's more than they make from selling fishing licenses for their entire EEZ.
That is wild. A tiny island nation effectively monetizing its sovereignty by creating a legal black hole for the U.S. justice system.
It's a niche, a very controversial one, but a very profitable one. It raises huge questions about global equity and justice, but from the Cook Islands perspective, they are providing a legal service in a competitive global market.
But there is another potential windfall on the horizon, and this one might be even more controversial than the hidden cash: seabed mining.
This brings us back to the ocean, and back to that massive EEZ. The deep seabed in the Cook Islands zone is, in places, literally paved with polymetallic nodules.
They look like black potatoes, right? That's what I read.
Basically, yes. Lumpy, potato-sized rocks sitting on the sediment thousands of meters down. But inside those unassuming lumps are high concentrations of cobalt, nickel, copper, and manganese.
The battery metals.
The exact metals the world is screaming for. The metals you need for electric vehicles, for wind turbines, for the entire green transition. The Cook Islands is sitting on a gold mine, or rather a cobalt mine of these things.
And they want to harvest them.
They're moving forward aggressively. They passed the Seabed Minerals Act in 2019. In 2025, they signed exploration agreements with both U.S. and Chinese-affiliated companies.
But hold on. We just spent all this time talking about Moana, the sacred ocean, the world's largest marine park. How do you square "we are the guardians of the pristine ocean" with "we are going to send massive robotic dredgers to scrape the ocean floor"?
That is the tension. That is the core of the debate raging in the country right now.
It's a contradiction.
The government argues that it is necessary for their economic independence and self-sufficiency. They argue that if the world wants green energy, these metals have to come from somewhere, and it's better to pick them up off the seafloor than to strip mine the rainforests of the Congo or Indonesia. They call it the blue economy.
What do the environmentalists and marine biologists say?
They say we have absolutely no idea what we're doing. We know less about the deep ocean floor than we do about the surface of Mars. Dredging up those nodules could destroy entire ecosystems we haven't even discovered yet. It will create huge sediment plumes that could drift for miles and choke marine life, including things like our expensive peppermint angelfish in the Twilight Zone.
It feels like a massive gamble. They're betting the farm or the ocean on this industry.
And they are doing it because they want to reduce that 67% dependence on tourism and foreign aid. If the mining pays off, the Cook Islands could become one of the wealthiest nations per capita in the Pacific. If it goes wrong, they could ruin their primary natural resource forever.
High-stakes poker in the South Pacific.
Played by a country with a resident population smaller than many universities.
Let's talk about those people. Segment 5.
Yeah.
Culture. We've talked about the politics and the money. But what about the soul of the place?
The culture of the Cook Islands has gone through massive trauma and, at the same time, shown massive resilience. The pivot point for everything was the year 1821.
Missionary.
The London Missionary Society, led by a man named John Williams. When they arrived, the conversion to Christianity was incredibly rapid. It wasn't a centuries-long struggle like in some places. It happened in decades.
And it was thorough.
Very thorough. And with that conversion came a very forceful rejection of the old ways. The sources describe the mass burning of the idol gods or staff gods. These were intricate, massive wood carvings that represented the ancestors and deities. Some were 20 feet long, carved from a single piece of ironwood.
They just burned them.
Yeah.
Entire artistic and spiritual tradition up in smoke.
Many were burned. Some were burned by the missionaries, but many were burned by the islanders themselves as a public demonstration of their new faith. A few were saved by the missionaries and sent back to London as curiosities, proof of their success in converting the heathens.
Which
means, ironically, that the best and largest collection of traditional Cook Islands religious art is now in the British Museum, not in Rarotonga.
That is a profound, almost incalculable loss of physical history.
It is. But culture is adaptable. It finds new ways to express itself. When one door closes, another opens. And this brings us to tivaevae.
I looked up pictures of these after reading the notes. They're stunning. These are the quilts, right?
Yes. Elaborate, beautiful patchwork quilts. Now, quilting isn't originally Polynesian. The technique was introduced by the wives of the missionaries. They taught the local women how to sew patchwork as a civilized pastime.
But the Cook Island women didn't just copy the British floral patterns.
No. They completely indigenized the art form. They took the needle and thread and created something vibrant, bold, and deeply Polynesian. The designs are almost never geometric like American quilts. They usually feature local botany flowers like the tiaramori, leaves, sea life, in these incredibly bright, high-contrast colors.
It's not just about the blanket, though, is it? It's about the making of it, the process.
Correct. That's the most important part. Tivaevae is a communal activity. You don't usually make one alone in your room. Women gather in groups called venetini. They work together on a single quilt. They sing, they gossip, they tell stories, they pass on traditions, they teach the younger generation.
It became the new social glue.
It became the social fabric of the community.
I love that image. Taking a tool from the colonizer, the sewing needle, and using it to stitch your own community tighter together after so much was torn apart.
It's a beautiful metaphor for cultural resilience. And these quilts are high-status items. They are treasures. You don't just buy them at a souvenir shop. They are gifted at weddings, at haircutting ceremonies for young boys, at funerals where they drape the casket. They wrap the milestones of life.
We should mention language, too, because we talked about the diversity of the islands, and that's reflected in this speech.
Absolutely. English is the official language of government, but Cook Islands Maori is the language of the heart. But even that isn't a monolith. Because the islands are so far apart, the languages drifted over the centuries of isolation.
Give me an example.
The language spoken on Puka Puka in the far north is actually much closer to Samoan than it is to the Maori spoken on Rarotonga in the south.
Really?
Yes. It reflects the ancient migration paths of the Pacific. Puka Puka is geographically closer to Samoa than Rarotonga, so its linguistic roots are different. It's a distinct language, really.
It really drives home just how spread out this country is. It's almost a collection of city-states or island states, bound together by a line on a map.
And now, bound together by a diaspora. Which brings us to our final, and perhaps most critical, segment, demographics. The human equation.
We threw out some numbers earlier, but I want to drill down on them because they're hard to wrap your head around. You said there are about 15,000 people living in the Cook Islands.
Roughly, yes. The resident population fluctuates, but it hovers around 15,000 to 17,000 people.
And how many people of Cook Islands descent are in New Zealand
The last census had it at over 80,000.
and Australia?
Another 28,000, roughly.
Okay, let that sink in. For every one Cook Islander living in the Cook Islands, there are nearly 7 or 8 living overseas.
It is a nation turned inside out. The majority of the nation lives outside the nation's borders.
What does that do to a country, to a culture?
It creates what sociologists call a transnational corporation of kin. The nation doesn't end at the reef. The real Cook Islands is a network that stretches from Rarotonga to Auckland to Sydney to Brisbane. Money, people, ideas, culture. It all flows back and forth constantly.
But it creates massive practical problems, surely. If all the young working-age people leave for higher wages in New Zealand, who runs the country?
That is the crisis. Depopulation of the outer islands, the northern group especially, is severe. Some islands have fewer than 50 people left. Who maintains the airstrip? Who teaches the school? Who catches the rats to protect the birds?
It's the brain drain on steroids.
It is. And it leads to a labor shortage in the main economic hub, Rarotonga. Paradoxically, the Cook Islands now has to import foreign labor from the Philippines, from Fiji, to work in the hotels and service industries because the locals who would be doing those jobs are working in similar jobs in New Zealand for more money.
So you have Cook Islanders serving coffee in Auckland and Filipinos serving coffee in Rarotonga.
Globalization in a nutshell.
It raises a really deep philosophical question about what a nation actually is. Is the Cook Islands the soil, the rocks, the 236 square kilometers? Or is it the people, the gente hermosa, wherever they happen to be?
That is the existential question they're wrestling with every single day. The name change debate showed us that the people overseas still feel a deep connection and ownership. But the people on the ground are the ones keeping the lights on and the culture alive in its homeland.
So let's try to summarize this incredible journey. We've gone from sunken volcanoes to high-finance tax havens. We've seen a tiny nation that acts like a global player.
A nation that has managed to secure the military and diplomatic protection of a larger neighbor, New Zealand, while carving out its own independent relationships with superpowers like the US and China. A truly clever arrangement.
A nation that declares itself the guardian of the world's largest marine park, while simultaneously preparing to harvest the very minerals that lie on its seafloor.
A nation of contrasts, of paradoxes, tradition and modernity, conservation and exploitation, home and away.
It really is a balancing act.
Yeah.
And it feels like the balance is shifting, that the ground is moving under their feet.
It is, and that leads to my final provocative thought for you to mull over.
Go for it.
If you look at the trajectory, the diplomatic recognition by the U.S., the pursuit of seabed mining revenue, the increasingly distinct foreign policy, the Cook Islands, is acting more and more like a fully independent state. It is, in a way, growing up and moving out of the family home.
Right. They're flexing their sovereign muscles.
The question is, will the free association model eventually break under that pressure? Can a nation truly be independent on the global stage, signing deals with China and America while its citizens pledge allegiance to another country's passport? At what point does New Zealand look at this potentially wealthy, mining-rich, diplomatically active nation and say, okay, you're doing great, we're proud of you, but you can't have our passports anymore, it's time to have your own?
That is the $64 million question. If they succeed too much at being independent, they might lose the very safety net that allowed them to succeed in the first place.
Exactly. Is the current situation a permanent, clever loophole in the international system? Or is it just a transition phase toward full, complete separation and a Cook Islands passport?
Only time and maybe the price of cobalt will tell.
Indeed.
While you ponder the geopolitical future of the Pacific, I have 2 homework assignments for you. First, go to your search engine of choice and look up tivaevae quilts. The colors are incredible. They will brighten up your day.
They really are works of art. Truly beautiful.
And second, look up the peppermint angelfish.
Oh.
Just don't look at the price tag if you're thinking about starting an aquarium.
Stick to goldfish. Much more affordable.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. We'll catch you on the next one.